The diplomatic station floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. Inside its massive halls, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered for the most important meeting of the decade. War was coming, and everyone knew it. Ambassador Arya Chun walked through the crowded corridor, her small frame barely visible among the towering aliens around her. She stood only 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. Her clothes were plain and professional. Nothing about her suggested danger or power. The Kratorians noticed her first. These massive reptilian warriors stood over 8 feet tall, with scales like armor and teeth designed to tear flesh. Their leader, War Chief Brachus, watched the small human with amusement in his yellow eyes. "The humans send us this," he rumbled to his officers. "A tiny female who looks like she would break in a strong wind?" His officers laughed. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder, the Vex delegates observed from their section. These insectoid creatures moved as one, their hive-mind connection making them act in perfect coordination. Their multifaceted eyes studied Arya with cold calculation. They saw no threat? Humans were soft creatures, barely worth attention. Arya heard the laughter. She felt the dismissive stares. She said nothing. Her face remained calm and pleasant as she took her seat in the negotiation chamber. The chamber itself was enormous, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps and territorial boundaries. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Ambassador Thelen of the Centauri Confederation sat near Arya. His people were humanoid but taller, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. He had been a diplomat for 40 years and had seen countless negotiations fail. "First time at the station?" he asked Arya quietly. "Yes," she replied with a soft smile. "I'm looking forward to learning from everyone here." Thelen almost felt sorry for her. She seemed so innocent, so unprepared for the brutal reality of galactic politics. The meeting began. The issue was simple but deadly. A border system contained rare minerals that both the Kratorian Empire and the Vex hierarchy claimed. Both had sent military forces. Ships had been destroyed. Soldiers had died. Now they demanded the Galactic Coalition choose a side. War Chief Brachus stood, his massive form dominating the chamber. "The Kratorian Empire has owned this system for 3 centuries. The Vex are thieves and liars. We demand the Coalition recognize our rightful claim." The Vex primary speaker responded, its voice a strange mixture of clicks and translated words. "The Kratorians are barbarians who destroy everything they touch. The system was unclaimed territory. We arrived first. It belongs to the hierarchy." Back and forth they argued. Other delegates tried to speak, but the two powers drowned them out. Hours passed. Nothing was resolved. During a break, War Chief Brachus approached Arya's station. He loomed over her, using his size to intimidate as Kratorians always did with smaller species. "Human," he growled. "Your species is new to the Coalition. You are weak and few in number. I advise you to support the Kratorian claim. We do not forget our friends. We also do not forget our enemies." The room went silent. Every delegate watched to see how the small human would react. Most expected her to stammer or agree immediately. The Kratorians were not a people you wanted as enemies. Arya looked up at the massive warrior. Her expression remained calm. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. "War Chief Brachus, I appreciate your advice, but I must point out something important." She pulled up a document on her tablet and projected it for him to see. "According to the Kratorian Code of Honor, Section 12, Paragraph 7, a warrior who uses physical intimidation during diplomatic negotiations brings shame to his house. The punishment is loss of honor marks and removal from diplomatic duties." Brachus froze. His eyes widened slightly. Arya continued, her tone remaining respectful. "I'm certain you didn't mean to violate your own sacred codes, War Chief. Perhaps you simply forgot this specific passage. It's quite obscure. I only found it because I've been studying Kratorian law for the past 6 months." The other Kratorian delegates stared at their leader. In their culture, violating the Code of Honor was a serious offense. Brachus had just been caught doing exactly that, and by a human who knew their laws better than he did. Brachus straightened slowly. His face showed confusion and embarrassment. You have studied our codes? Of course, Arya said simply. How else could I understand your perspective? Diplomacy requires knowledge. The war chief stepped back. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement and returned to his seat. The gesture was minor, but everyone in the room understood its significance. The human had just forced a Praetorian war chief to back down without raising her voice or making a threat. The Vex delegates buzzed with communication. They had not expected this. They began reviewing what information they had about human diplomatic practices. It was very little dot as the session ended. Ambassador Thelen approached Arya again. His expression had changed from pity to curiosity. You studied the Praetorian honor codes? He asked. Those documents are thousands of pages long and written in Old Praetorian. Most translators can't even handle the language properly. Arya gathered her materials calmly. I also studied Vex hierarchy protocol, Centauri trade law, and the cultural practices of every species with a seat on this council. It seemed like the responsible thing to do. Thelen stared at her. That would take years of work. I had 8 months to prepare, Arya said. She smiled at him, and for the first time, Thelen saw something behind that pleasant expression. Something sharp and calculating. Humans might be physically weak, Ambassador Thelen, but we're very good at one thing. What's that? We watch. We listen. We learn. She picked up her tablet. I should go prepare for tomorrow's session. I expect the Vex will try a different approach now that they've seen what happened with War Chief Brachus. I need to be ready. She walked away, leaving Thelen standing alone. He looked across the chamber at the various alien delegates. The Praetorians were in heated discussion. The Vex were unusually agitated. Other species were whispering among themselves, all because of one small human woman who had done nothing but quote a law. Thelen had a sudden, disturbing thought. What if humanity's real strength wasn't their technology or their military? What if it was something far more dangerous? The ability to understand their enemies completely? He watched Arya disappear into the corridor, and felt something he rarely experienced after 40 years of diplomacy. Fear. 3 days passed, and the diplomatic station felt like it might explode at any moment. Tensions grew worse with each session. The Praetorians and Vex brought more evidence against each other. Ships gathered in orbit. War seemed inevitable now. Ambassador Arya Shun attended every public session, always sitting quietly in her designated spot. She rarely spoke during the official meetings. When she did, her comments were brief and seemed almost naive. She asked simple questions about cultural traditions or requested clarification on minor points. The other delegates began to ignore her again. She was clearly out of her depth, they thought. That incident with War Chief Brachus had been luck, nothing more, but Arya was never really in the official sessions. Not mentally, anyway. Her real work happened in the quiet spaces between meetings, in the dining halls, in the observation lounges. In the private corridors where delegates walked alone, on the 4th evening, she had dinner with Ambassador Prix of the Talvarian Republic. The Talvarians were a bird-like species, small and often overlooked by the larger powers. Prix seemed surprised that a human would want to meet with him. Your people are fascinating, Arya said, picking at her meal. I read that Talvarian family structures are based on wing groups rather than blood relations. That must create interesting political dynamics. Prix's feathers ruffled with pleasure. Nobody ever asked about Talvarian culture. Yes. Our wing groups form bonds stronger than your human families. It means our loyalty structures are completely different from species like the Praetorians. They talked for 2 hours. Arya asked questions and listened carefully. She seemed genuinely interested in everything Prix said. When they parted, Prix felt honored that someone had finally paid attention to his people. What Prix didn't realize was that Arya had just learned the exact voting patterns of the Talvarian delegation, and which larger powers they feared most. The next day, Arya had tea with Sub-Ambassador Kelthus of the Vex hierarchy. The Vex rarely met with other species privately. Their hive-mind nature made individual conversations strange for them. "I hope I'm not being rude," Arya said carefully, "but I'm curious about something. The Vex always act in perfect unity. Does that mean every Vex agrees with every decision?" Kelthus's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "An interesting question, human. The hierarchy prefers unity, yes, but we are not all identical. There are differences of opinion, differences in priority. That must create tension sometimes," Arya said innocently. "Sometimes," Kelthus admitted. Then, as if realizing it had said too much, it quickly changed the subject, but Arya had heard what she needed. The Vex were not as unified as they pretended. There were factions. There were internal conflicts. Over the next several days, Arya had dozens of these small conversations. She never seemed to be doing anything important. She was just the friendly human ambassador who liked learning about other cultures. She asked about history, about food, about art. She laughed at jokes she didn't quite understand. She made herself seem harmless and slightly foolish, and all the while, she was building a map in her mind. A map of alliances and grudges, of secret fears and hidden ambitions, of who owed whom favors and who held old grudges. Ambassador Thelen watched her with growing concern. He had been a diplomat long enough to recognize a pattern when he saw one. On the 8th day, something unexpected happened. A Vex sub-commander named Zilix approached Arya in a quiet observation lounge. The station's artificial night cycle had just begun, and few people were around. "Ambassador Chun," Zilix said quietly. Its translated voice sounded nervous, which was unusual for a Vex. "I must speak with you, alone." Arya gestured to the empty lounge. "We are alone, sub-commander. What troubles you?" Zilix moved closer. Its insectoid body trembled slightly. "You have been asking questions, learning about everyone. I know what you are doing." Arya's expression remained calm and friendly. "I'm just trying to understand everyone better." "Isn't that what diplomacy is about?" "No," Zilix said. "You are gathering intelligence. You are building leverage." "I understand because I do the same thing within the hierarchy." Arya tilted her head slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you have already figured out the truth," Zilix said. Its mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress in Vex biology. "The hierarchy does not truly want this mining system. The resources there are valuable, yes, but not worth a war. But certain commanders within our leadership see war as an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" "Power," Zilix said simply. "The hierarchy has 3 major queens who share control. They compete constantly. War would allow one queen to dominate the others. Some commanders support war because it benefits their queen. They don't care about the mining rights at all." Arya nodded slowly. "And you're telling me this because I serve the 3rd queen who does not want war. But we are outnumbered in the current leadership council. If war comes, my queen will be blamed for opposing it if we lose. If we win, the other queens will claim credit." Zilix leaned even closer. "I am asking you, human, to stop this war. I believe you have the intelligence to do it." "What makes you think I have that kind of power?" Arya asked. "Because you made War Chief Brachus back down without touching a weapon. Because every delegate you've spoken to leaves the conversation having revealed more than they intended. Because you are dangerous in ways the others haven't realized yet." Arya was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What can you tell me?" "About the Praetorian situation?" Zilix's response confirmed what Arya had already suspected. War Chief Brachus was facing challenges to his authority back home. Younger warriors wanted to replace him. He needed a victory to secure his position. But it didn't have to be a military victory. A diplomatic triumph would work just as well, maybe better. After Zilix left, Arya sat alone in the observation lounge, looking out at the stars. The pieces were all coming together now. The Vex had internal factions fighting for power. The Praetorians had a leader who needed to prove himself. Both sides were being pushed toward war by people who would benefit from chaos. She pulled out her tablet and began writing messages. Carefully worded messages to carefully selected people. The next morning, rumors began spreading through the station. The Praetorians learned from an anonymous source that the Vex military buildup wasn't aggressive expansion. It was actually a defensive posture because of internal instability. Some Vex commanders were positioning ships to control their own territory, not to attack Praetorian space simultaneously. Certain Vex delegates received information suggesting that War Chief Brachus was actually a moderate voice in Praetorian leadership. If he fell from power, he would be replaced by someone far more aggressive. Someone who would actually want war. None of the information was false. Arya only revealed truths that people hadn't been able to see because they were too focused on their own positions. Ambassador Thelen found her in the conference library that afternoon. "You're manipulating everyone," he said bluntly. Arya looked up from the historical document she was reading. "Am I?" "Don't play innocent with me," Thelen said, but his tone wasn't entirely angry. "I've been watching you. You're feeding information to different factions, you're changing how people see the situation." "I'm providing context," Arya corrected gently. The Praetorians and Vex were both operating on incomplete information and assumptions about each other. "I'm just helping them see the full picture." "That's manipulation, is it?" Arya asked. "Or is it diplomacy?" "What's the difference, Ambassador Thelen, between giving someone information that changes their mind and explaining facts that help them make better decisions?" Thelen sat down across from her. He suddenly looked very tired. "You're playing a dangerous game? If people realize what you're doing, they won't," Arya said confidently. "Because I'm the weak human girl who asks simple questions and smiles a lot. Nobody suspects me of anything more complicated than being naive and curious." Thelen stared at her. This time he saw her clearly. Not the small, pleasant woman who seemed harmless, but the calculating intelligence behind those calm eyes. The master strategist who had been 10 steps ahead of everyone from the moment she arrived. "Who are you really?" he asked. Arya smiled that same pleasant smile. "I'm exactly who I appear to be, Ambassador. I'm just a human who pays attention." She returned to her reading, and Thelen left the library with a chill running down his spine. The galaxy had no idea what humanity was capable of. And that, he realized, was exactly how Arya wanted it. The alert sirens woke everyone on the station at 0400 hours. Arya was already awake, reading reports in her quarters when the emergency message came through. A Praetorian cruiser had fired on a Vex scout ship near the disputed system. 17 Vex crew members were dead. Both sides were now mobilizing their full fleets. War had finally come. The emergency council session began within an hour. The chamber was packed with delegates, all of them shouting. The Vex demanded immediate military retaliation. The Praetorians claimed the scout ship had been spying in their territory. Smaller species began declaring which side they would support. The Galactic coalition was fracturing in real time. Earth must choose. War Chief Brachus roared, pointing directly at Arya. "Will humanity stand with the Praetorian Empire, or will you join our enemies?" The Vex primary speaker's mandibles clicked threateningly. "The humans will declare their allegiance now, or they will be considered enemies of the hierarchy as well." All eyes turned to Arya. Her human colleagues looked terrified. Marcus, her aide, whispered urgently, "Ambassador, what do we do? We can't fight either of them." "We're too new, too weak." "Quiet," Arya said softly. She stood up slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. The shouting continued around her. Nobody was paying attention to the small human woman standing calmly in the middle of chaos. "I would like to speak," she said. Her voice was quiet, nobody heard her. The arguments raged on. Arya pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A high-pitched tone filled the chamber, cutting through all the noise. It was designed to be uncomfortable for most species' hearing ranges. Everyone stopped shouting and looked at her. "Thank you," Arya said, putting the device away. "Now, I would like to speak about this situation. If you don't mind." War Chief Brachus laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "What could you possibly say that matters now, human? War has begun. There is no more time for your clever words." "Then it won't take long," Arya replied calmly. She activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Star maps appeared showing military positions. "If war begins today," she said, "here is what will happen. The Praetorian fleet will immediately move to secure the disputed system, but they'll have to split their forces because the hierarchy will attack 3 of their supply routes here, here, and here. She pointed to locations on the map. The Vex delegates stirred. Those were indeed their planned targets. How did she know? The Vex will win the initial engagements, Arya continued, because their hive mind coordination gives them tactical advantages in the first 3 days. But by day 5, the Praetorian reinforcements from the outer territories will arrive, and the Vex supply lines will be overstretched. War Chief Brachus leaned forward. His officers were whispering to him, confirming her analysis was accurate. By week 3, Arya said, her voice still calm and professional, both sides will have lost approximately 30% of their fleets. At that point, the Syndicate worlds will see an opportunity. They'll move into both your territories while you're weak. The Centauri Confederation will be forced to choose sides to protect their trade routes. The whole galactic sector will be at war. She paused, looking around the chamber. Everyone was silent now, staring at the maps and the frighteningly accurate predictions. By month 6, Arya concluded, both the Praetorian Empire and the Vex hierarchy will be significantly weakened. Your enemies will be strengthened. You'll both lose far more than you could ever gain from one mining system. And approximately 4 million sentient beings will be dead. Ambassador Thelen stood up. How do you know all this? These are military secrets. I don't have access to your military secrets, Arya said. But I understand logistics, supply chains, and strategic doctrine. I've studied every major war fought by every species in this chamber for the last 200 years. This is what always happens. War is predictable when you understand the patterns. A Centauri delegate called out, even if your analysis is correct, what does it matter? The first shot has been fired. The Vex crew is dead. There's no going back now. Arya's expression changed. The pleasant smile disappeared. What replaced it was something harder. Something that made several delegates uncomfortable. About that first shot, she said quietly. I need to show you something else. She changed the holographic display. Now it showed communication logs and flight data. The Praetorian cruiser that fired on the Vex scout ship was commanded by Captain Skarn, Arya said. Captain Skarn has been sending encrypted messages to a group of Praetorian officers who oppose War Chief Brachus's leadership. They believe he's too soft, too willing to negotiate. They want to replace him. War Chief Brachus stood up, his expression dangerous. What are you saying, human? I'm saying that Captain Skarn fired on that Vex ship without authorization, Arya said. He did it to start a war that would make you look weak, War Chief. He wants to overthrow you. This attack wasn't Empire policy. It was a coup attempt. The Praetorian delegates erupted in angry roars. Brachus demanded to see the evidence. Arya provided it all. Communication logs, flight recorder data, even testimony from other Praetorian officers who had suspected something was wrong. But there's more, Arya said, and now she turned to the Vex delegation. Subcommanders Velrix and Thrain have also been working to start this war. They serve the second queen of the hierarchy, who would benefit most from military conflict. They've been positioning ships aggressively and suppressing intelligence reports that might lead to peaceful resolution. The Vex delegation went completely still. In their culture, betraying the hierarchy's unity was one of the worst crimes imaginable. Arya provided evidence for this too. Communications intercepts. Resource allocation records that didn't match official reports. Testimony from Zilix and others who had been suspicious. The chamber erupted into chaos again, but it was different now. This wasn't Praetorians versus Vex. This was loyalists versus traitors within each faction. War Chief Brachus was shouting orders to his officers. The Vex primary speaker was communicating rapidly with its homeworld. Security forces were being dispatched to arrest the conspirators. In all the confusion, Ambassador Thelen made his way to Arya. She was calmly gathering her materials. As if she had simply given a routine presentation? How? Thelen asked. How did you discover all of this? When did you have time to investigate military conspiracies in 2 separate empires? Arya looked at him with those calm, calculating eyes. I told you before, Ambassador. I watch, I listen. I learn, and most importantly, nobody watches me back. You're terrifying, Thelen said. It wasn't an insult. It was simple truth. No, Arya said softly. I'm just doing my job. My job is to prevent wars, Ambassador. Sometimes that means exposing the people who want to start them. Over the next few hours, the situation stabilized. Captain Skarn and his co-conspirators were arrested by Praetorian military police. The Vex Second Queen's supporters were detained by hierarchy security. Both sides realized they had been manipulated by their own people. The immediate threat of war had passed, but something had changed in the chamber. The way the other delegates looked at Arya was different now. There was no more dismissal, no more amusement at the weak human girl. There was fear and respect, and the uncomfortable realization that humanity might be more dangerous than any of them had imagined. War Chief Bracchus approached Arya as the session ended. He looked at her for a long moment, his reptilian face unreadable. You knew about the conspiracy, he said. You could have exposed it at any time, but you waited until the perfect moment, until it would have maximum impact. Yes, Arya said simply. Why? Because if I had revealed it earlier, you wouldn't have believed me. You needed to see the evidence when you were ready to accept it. Timing matters in diplomacy, War Chief. Bracchus nodded slowly. In his culture, a warrior who defeated you in combat earned respect. Arya had defeated him without ever throwing a punch. That earned something more than respect. You are Kravesh, he said, using a Praetorian term that had no direct translation. It meant something like warrior of the mind or dangerous thinker. Arya bowed slightly, accepting the title. As she left the chamber, Marcus caught up with her. He looked exhausted. Ambassador, he said, that was incredible. But I have to ask. You said nobody was watching you. But how did nobody notice you investigating two different military conspiracies? Arya smiled, that pleasant, harmless smile that had fooled so many people. Marcus, she said, who pays attention to the quiet girl asking simple questions? The diplomatic station felt different in the days after the conspiracy was exposed. Captain Skarn and the Vex traitors were in custody. War Chief Bracchus had secured his position by rooting out the coup plotters. The Vex hierarchy had dealt with its internal faction problem. The immediate crisis was over, but tension remained. A different kind of tension. Arya noticed it in the way delegates looked at her now. They no longer dismissed her as weak or naive, but they didn't approach her with friendship either. It was wariness, suspicion, even fear. The small human woman, who had seemed so harmless, had revealed herself as something far more dangerous. She had uncovered secrets that powerful empires had tried to hide. She had manipulated events with terrifying precision. And she had done it all while appearing completely innocent. If one human could do this much damage while pretending to be weak, what could humanity do if they decided to be aggressive? Ambassador Thelen visited Arya in her quarters on the third day after the emergency session. He looked troubled. There's talk in the private channels, he said without introduction. Several delegations are calling for your expulsion from the station. Arya nodded calmly. She was seated at her desk, reviewing documents. I expected that. Which delegations specifically? The Gren Collective, the Ishara Empire, even some of the Centauri representatives. Thelen sat down heavily. They say you're too dangerous, that you interfere too much in other species' internal affairs. There's a formal complaint being drafted. Will it pass? Thelen hesitated. I don't know. The Praetorians and Vex won't support it, ironically. You saved both of them from disasters. But the smaller species are frightened. They're wondering what secrets you might know about them. Arya turned to face him fully. Are they right to be frightened, Ambassador? Are you asking if I think you're dangerous? Thelen met her eyes. Yes, I think you're one of the most dangerous people I've ever met. But I also think you've only used that danger to prevent worse violence. So I don't know if we should be more afraid of you or more afraid of what happens without you. There was a long silence. Finally, Arya said, Do you want to know something about me? Something personal? Thelen nodded. I grew up in a region of Earth that was always at war, Arya said quietly. Small wars, local conflicts, but constant. My family home was destroyed when I was 8 years old. My father was killed. My mother and I survived by hiding, by being invisible, by understanding the soldiers who occupied our town. She looked down at her hands. I learned very young that violence usually happens because people don't understand each other, because they're afraid, because they see enemies instead of people with fears and problems of their own. I watched peace negotiations fail because diplomats only cared about their own positions. They never tried to understand what the other side actually needed. So you became a diplomat who understands everyone, Thelen said. I became someone who learns everything, Arya corrected. Because information is the only real power that matters. Physical strength, military might, economic resources, those are all temporary. But understanding? That lasts. That's the real weapon. Thelen was quiet for a moment. Do you ever feel guilty about manipulating people? Every day, Arya admitted. But I feel more guilty when I let wars happen because I was too weak to stop them. I'd rather carry the guilt of manipulation than the guilt of standing by while millions die. Before Thelen could respond, Arya's communication device beeped. She checked it, and her expression changed slightly. That's interesting. What is it? A message from someone in the Zirith Collective. They want to meet with me privately. Arya stood up. This could be problematic. The Zirith? Thelen's face paled. They're war profiteers. They make their money selling weapons and mercenaries. If the Crotorian Vex War had happened, they would have made trillions of credits, Arya finished. Yes, and now they're angry that I stopped it. I should go meet with them, alone. That's too dangerous, Ambassador Thelen, Arya said gently. Thank you for your concern. But this is exactly the kind of meeting I need to handle personally. The Zirith representative met Arya in a private conference room near the station's commercial sector. His name was Vorton, and he looked humanoid but with gray skin and silver eyes that reflected light like mirrors. He smiled when Arya entered, but the smile was cold and calculated. Ambassador Chung, he said smoothly, how kind of you to meet with me. How can I help the Zirith Collective? Arya asked, sitting down across from him. Vorton's smile widened. You've caused my organization significant financial difficulties. The war you prevented would have generated substantial economic activity. Weapon sales, mercenary contracts, reconstruction services, all gone because you decided to play peacemaker. I'm sorry your profit model depends on sentient beings killing each other, Arya said without emotion. Don't be naive, Vorton said, his tone hardening. War is business. It's always been business. The galaxy has survived this long because groups like the Zirith Collective maintain the balance of power. We ensure that no one species becomes too dominant. Sometimes that requires conflict. You mean you profit from creating conflict? Arya corrected. Vorton waved his hand dismissively. Call it what you want. The point is, you've disrupted a very delicate and profitable system. The collective is not pleased? We're here to offer you a choice. A choice? Restart the Crotorian Vex conflict or face consequences. We have significant influence over trade routes throughout this sector. Humanity is new to galactic society. Your supply lines, your colonies, your economic development, all of it depends on cooperative relationships with established powers. Relationships that can be disrupted very easily. He leaned forward. Make the conflict happen, Ambassador. We don't care how. Find a reason? Create an incident. Use your obvious talents for manipulation to push them back to war. Or Earth will find itself very isolated very quickly. Arya looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was neutral, giving nothing away. Then she asked a simple question. How much do you know about human information networks? Vorton blinked, confused by the change in topic. What? Human information systems? Arya repeated. Our communication networks. Our data storage. Our ability to distribute information across multiple systems simultaneously. How much do you know about them? I don't see what that has to do with. It has everything to do with your threat, Arya said calmly. She pulled out her tablet. You see, for the past 6 weeks, I've been documenting every Zereth collective weapons sale. Every bribe you've paid to government officials. Every false flag operation you've funded to start conflicts. I have evidence of 47 violations of Galactic Coalition law. Evidence that would destroy your organization's reputation and result in criminal charges across 17 systems. Vorten's silver eyes widened. That's impossible. Our operations are completely secure, are they? Arya asked. Are you completely sure? Because I've distributed copies of all this evidence to journalists, government officials, and law enforcement agencies across 40 different systems. The documents are time-locked. If I don't enter a specific code every 48 hours, they automatically release to the public. You're bluffing, Vorten said, but his voice was uncertain now. Am I? Arya stood up. Go back to your organization, Vorten. Run your security checks. See if I'm bluffing. While you do that, consider this. If anything happens to me, if Earth's trade routes are disrupted, if human colonies face any unexplained difficulties, those documents release immediately. And the Zereth Collective will face the consequences of decades of illegal weapons trafficking. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back at him. You said war is business. You're right. But information is power. And humanity is very, very good at managing information. Remember that. She left Vorten sitting alone in the conference room. His confidence completely shattered. Outside, Marcus was waiting nervously. How did it go? It went well, Arya said. She kept walking, her pace steady and calm. Did you really document all their illegal activities? Marcus asked, hurrying to keep up. Did you really distribute evidence to 40 systems? Arya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, No, I'm bluffing. I don't have time to investigate the Zereth Collective while handling the Praetorian Vex crisis. That would take months of work. Marcus stopped walking. You're bluffing? But what if they figure that out? Arya looked back at him with a slight smile. Then I'll already be working on Plan B, but they won't figure it out, Marcus. They'll spend the next several weeks investigating themselves, checking their security systems, looking for evidence that doesn't exist. By the time they realize I was bluffing, the crisis will be over and they'll have missed their opportunity to interfere. But what if they had called your bluff right there in the room? Then I would have adapted, Arya said simply. That's what humans do best, Marcus. We adapt, we improvise. We make our enemies think we're 10 steps ahead even when we're making it up as we go. She continued walking, leaving her aides standing in the corridor with a new understanding of just how dangerous human diplomacy could be. That night, Arya sat alone in her quarters. The treaty negotiations would resume tomorrow. The real work was still ahead. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of exhaustion. Her tablet showed messages from Earth Command, from other human diplomats, from her family. She answered them all with her usual professionalism. But there was one message she wrote only for herself, saved in a private file. I'm using every manipulation tactic I know to prevent wars and save lives. But what happens when the next human diplomat decides to use these same skills for conquest instead of peace? What happens when Earth realizes how effective manipulation can be? I've shown the galaxy that humans are dangerous. Have I made things better or worse in the long run? She saved the file and closed her tablet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conflicts to navigate, new people to understand and outmaneuver. Ambassador Arya Shun, the weak human girl that nobody suspected, had become the most dangerous diplomat in the galaxy. And she was just getting started. The final treaty session began 3 weeks after the conspiracy was exposed. The diplomatic chamber was quieter now. The Praetorians and Vex had both replaced their most aggressive representatives with moderates. War Chief Brachus remained, his position stronger than ever after crushing the coup attempt. The Vex sent a new primary speaker who represented the unified will of all 3 queens. Everyone knew this was the real test. The conspiracies were gone. The immediate threats were handled. But the core issue remained: who controlled the disputed mining system? Arya arrived early as always. She took her seat and reviewed her notes while other delegates filed in. Some nodded respectfully to her. Others avoided eye contact. All of them were aware of her presence in ways they hadn't been at the beginning. Ambassador Thelen sat beside her. "Nervous?" he asked quietly. "Always," Arya admitted. "The hard part isn't exposing conspiracies or preventing immediate violence. The hard part is building something that lasts, something that prevents the next war." The session began. Both sides presented their final positions. The Praetorians claimed historical rights to the system. The Vex claimed discovery and development rights. Neither side would compromise on full ownership. For 3 hours, the delegates argued. Proposals were made and rejected. Compromises were suggested and refused. The negotiation was deadlocked. Finally, Arya stood up and requested the floor. War Chief Brachus nodded. "The human may speak." Arya walked to the center of the chamber. She looked smaller than ever among the towering aliens, but nobody was fooled by her size anymore. "I have a proposal," she said. "It won't make either side completely happy, but it will give both sides what they actually need." The Vex primary speaker's mandibles clicked. "Explain." "The Praetorian Empire needs the system because losing it would appear as weakness to other species watching your borders. You need the victory for strategic reasons, not just economic ones. Am I correct, War Chief?" Brachus was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You are correct." Arya turned to the Vex delegation. "The hierarchy needs the mineral resources from this system to support your industrial expansion. The minerals themselves matter more than the territory. Am I correct?" "Yes," the primary speaker admitted. "Then here's my proposal," Arya said. She activated a holographic display showing the disputed system. The system remains officially under Praetorian sovereignty. This preserves the Empire's territorial claims and prevents the appearance of weakness. However, the Vex hierarchy receives exclusive mining rights for 50 years, with the Empire taking a 20% share of the profits. Both sides started to protest, but Arya continued quickly. Additionally, the system becomes a demilitarized zone. Both species maintain equal security forces for protection only, not conquest. A neutral station, administered by the Galactic Coalition, oversees the mining operations and ensures fair profit distribution. She looked at War Chief Brachus. "You keep the territory. Your sovereignty is acknowledged. Your strategic position is maintained." She turned to the Vex. "You get the resources you need. Full access to the minerals for half a century, and a guaranteed profit share even after that period ends." "But we lose control," the Vex primary speaker said. "You gain cooperation," Arya corrected. "And you avoid a war that would cost you far more than this compromise. Both of you do." The chamber was silent. Delegates looked at each other uncertainly. It wasn't a perfect solution. Neither side got everything they wanted, but that was the point. Ambassador Thelen stood up. "The Centauri Confederation supports this proposal. It's reasonable, fair, and most importantly, it prevents further conflict." Other delegates began voicing support. The smaller species especially favored the compromise. They had been terrified of being dragged into a larger war. War Chief Brachus looked at his advisors. They whispered urgently. Finally he stood. "The Praetorian Empire accepts this proposal," he said formally, "with one addition. We request that Ambassador Shun be named as the neutral overseer of the demilitarized zone for the first 5 years of this agreement." Arya blinked in surprise. "War Chief, I'm not sure you understand both our cultures," Brachus interrupted. "You have proven you can be trusted to see through deception. And frankly, human, both my people and the Vex will behave better if we know you're watching." The Vex primary speaker considered this. "The hierarchy agrees to this condition. Ambassador Chun's oversight is acceptable." Arya looked around the chamber. This was not what she had expected, but she nodded slowly. "I accept on the condition that I can train replacements from both your species. This station should eventually be administered by Praetorians and Vex working together, not by an outsider." Agreed, both sides said in unison. The treaty was signed that evening. Delegates from 40 species witnessed the ceremony. War Chief Brachus and the Vex primary speaker stood on opposite sides of Arya as they placed their marks on the document. As they did, Brachus spoke quietly, just loud enough for Arya to hear. "You have taught me something, human. True strength isn't always visible. Sometimes the most dangerous warrior is the one nobody sees coming," the Vex primary speaker added. In its clicking translated voice, "The hierarchy will integrate your methods into our diplomatic protocols. We have learned that understanding others is as valuable as military superiority." Arya didn't respond immediately. She watched as the treaty was officially recorded and transmitted to every coalition world. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I hope you've learned the right lessons. Because what I've shown you can be used for peace or for conquest. I chose peace. I hope you do the same." After the ceremony ended, there was a celebration. Delegates who had been enemies weeks ago now shared drinks and conversation. The tension that had filled the station for so long finally began to ease. Ambassador Thelen found Arya on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You did it," he said. "You actually prevented the war and created a lasting agreement." "Maybe," Arya said, "or maybe I just delayed the next crisis." "Peace is never permanent, Ambassador. It's something you have to maintain constantly." "Still," Thelen said, "what you've accomplished here will echo through the galaxy. People will remember the human who stopped the war." Arya shook her head. "They'll remember the weak girl nobody suspected. That's different, and that's important." "Why?" "Because humanity's greatest advantage is that nobody takes us seriously at first," Arya explained. "We're small, physically weak, technologically behind. Every species looks at us and thinks we're not a threat. By the time they realize how dangerous human intelligence and adaptability can be, we're already 10 steps ahead." She turned to face Thelen. "But that advantage only works if we use it wisely. If humanity starts being aggressive, starts conquering instead of cooperating, we lose that edge. Then we're just another species scrambling for power. That's why I sent a message to Earth Command today." "What kind of message?" "A warning," Arya said. "I told them what I've learned here. That manipulation is a powerful tool, but it's also dangerous. That we need to train more diplomats like me, yes, but we also need strict ethical guidelines. We need to make sure humanity uses its advantages to build bridges, not to control others." Thelen was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they'll listen?" "I don't know," Arya admitted, "but I had to try. Because if humanity becomes just another empire trying to dominate everyone else, we'll lose what makes us special. Our ability to understand others, our adaptability, our potential to be something better than the empires that came before us." They stood in silence, watching the stars. Ships were departing from the station now. Carrying news of the treaty to every corner of the galaxy, a young delegate approached them hesitantly. She was Talvarian, with soft gray feathers and large eyes that showed nervousness. "Ambassador Chun," she said quietly. "I'm Sub-Ambassador Lyris. I represent the Talvarian Republic. I was wondering if I could speak with you sometime. About diplomacy." Arya smiled warmly. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "My people are small like humans," Lyris said. "We're always overlooked by the bigger species. The Praetorians barely notice us. The Vex see us as irrelevant. But you changed everything while being just as small." "How? How do I make them take my people seriously?" Arya gestured for Lyris to sit with them. "The first lesson is this: don't try to make them take you seriously. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're weak and irrelevant. While they're ignoring you, watch everything. Learn everything. Understand their fears, their ambitions, their secrets. But won't that take years?" Lyris asked. "Yes," Arya said. "Real power takes time to build. Quick power is usually temporary. But if you're patient, if you're thorough, you'll become invaluable. Because you'll be the one who understands everyone else better than they understand themselves." Lyris's feathers ruffled with excitement. "Will you teach me?" "I'll share what I know," Arya said. "But remember, this kind of power comes with responsibility. Use it to prevent wars, not start them. Use it to build cooperation, not to control others. Promise me that." "I promise," Lyra said seriously. After the young Talvarian left, Thelen turned to Arya. "You're training the next generation of manipulators." "Now? I'm training the next generation of peacemakers," Arya corrected. "There's a difference, at least I hope there is." Over the following weeks, more requests came in. The Syndicate worlds wanted human diplomatic advisors. The Centauri Confederation offered to sponsor a human embassy in their core systems. Even the Kratorians and Vex requested human observers for their future negotiations. Humanity's reputation across the galaxy was changing. They were no longer seen as just another weak species trying to survive. They were recognized as something unique, something potentially more dangerous than any military fleet. They were the species that understood others. Arya prepared to return to Earth, her mission complete. But she knew this was just the beginning. She had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Now Earth would have to decide what to do with that capability. Her final report to Earth Command was detailed and honest. She described her methods, her successes, and her concerns. She ended with this: "We have proven that human intelligence and adaptability can change galactic politics. But power without ethics is just tyranny in a different form. As we expand our influence, we must remember what makes us human, our capacity for empathy, our ability to grow and change, our potential to be better than we were yesterday. If we lose that, we lose everything that makes us worth listening to in the first place." The message was sent. Arya boarded her transport ship. Watching the diplomatic station grow smaller through the VIEWPORT. Ambassador Thelen had come to see her off. Through the communication channel, he said, "The galaxy won't be the same after you, Arya Shun." "Good," Arya replied. "It shouldn't be. Change is the only constant in the universe. The question is whether we guide that change towards something better or let it happen randomly." As her ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Arya thought about the young Talvarian delegate, about War Chief Brachus's new respect for intelligence over strength, about the Vex learning to value individual perspective within their hive mind. Seeds had been planted, ideas had been shared. The galaxy had learned that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the weak ones might be the most dangerous of all Da, and they had learned that lesson from a 5-foot-tall, human woman who smiled pleasantly while changing the course of history. No one had suspected her. That was exactly as she had planned. But now the secret was out. Humanity was no longer just another species struggling to find its place in the galaxy. They were the species that others watched carefully, wondering what they would do next. And that, Arya thought as Earth grew larger in her viewport, was both humanity's greatest opportunity and its greatest responsibility. The weak girl had taught the galaxy a lesson. Now it was up to humanity to prove they had learned it too.